the first class that we had, we were talking about just the experiences that we have in walking to the cathedral in the outside area, the encounters that we have with people that are maybe on our property or in the parking lot areas or the C-train areas. And we talked about that and different encounters. And then last week we talked about encounters and experiences within the cathedral itself, that sometimes people will come in, they're always warmly welcomed, and our doors are open to everyone, but sometimes there are disruptions or awkward situations, and so that's what we were talking about last week. This week I want to just start by talking a little bit different, because we have been on this journey of awareness and understanding for over 1.5 years now. And I just wanted to know if we have discovered anything different, if our perceptions have changed in any way, or if our experiences have changed in any way. And just talking about if there's anything more that we would like to explore in that area. So maybe I'll just start, because 2 things this week. One, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, there was the Downtown Strategy Open House in Calgary that was a time for talking about the new downtown redevelopment and revitalization, especially of downtown West. And the mayor was there and talking about the conversion of some office space into apartment buildings. So it was a very good meeting and just discussion. But one thing that we noticed was that there were 5 of us from our Cathedral group in attendance, from our downtown focus group. And that was just a blessing, because it shows that, well, we've always had an interest, but our awareness is growing, and we're wanting to know what's happening. And there were booths set up all around the lobby of the building, where you could talk to different groups and people. And so each one of us had a time that we could walk around and just talk to the different organizations about what is happening with people downtown, vulnerable population. Are there plans for these services, or is this not an area of focus right now, and could it be in the future, and those kind of things. So we always frame what we're doing here with the 3 A's: awareness and advocacy and action. And I just realized that we're really becoming advocates in our city.
Wow.
So that's
I'm sorry, I had seen the note about that, and it slipped my mind, because what day was it, the meeting?
I think it was a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh.
2 weeks or a week and a half ago. So yeah, it was well attended by people, and mostly it was just talking about the new, building plans and that kind of thing. But it was an opportunity to talk with a lot of groups and individuals. So.
And was there any Q&A with the mayor about
not really
more vulnerable people and how it could develop?
Not really with the mayor, and I didn't stay for the whole thing because it went. Oh, thank you. Good ears, Seema.
Oh, right.
But there were panel discussions after. I couldn't stay that long, but those who did said that they had some opportunity to ask. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Gina, this is Seema and Zoe. Oh, you've met.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, excellent. All right, wonderful. So we're just talking about, Gina, about any change in perceptions or in awareness and advocacy or action that we have experienced with regards to the vulnerable population since we embarked on this journey of learning as a cathedral. And I was just talking about the Downtown strategy open house that was about a week and a half ago, and that about 5 of us were there from the cathedral, and just, advocating for the vulnerable population during that meeting with the different groups that were there.
Okay.
So, yeah. Any other experiences that people have had that have changes in perception since we started on this journey a year and a half ago?
I did have an experience actually.
Did you?
2 weeks ago, yeah.
Okay. Make sure that we're speaking loud enough, because I noticed on the video last week that if we were really quiet, it was hard to hear. So
Okay.
go ahead.
About 2 weeks ago, when we came to the end of the line to Somerset Station, because we take the whole thing,
Right.
and there was a woman inside the enclosure who was, well, I didn't know it was a woman at first. It was just an individual with their legs crossed sitting, but they were bent over so much that you couldn't see their face. The coat was covering them. And people were walking by and nobody was, it was actually my son that pointed them out. I said, we can't go by. I haven't been doing this training for nothing. So
There you go.
I went in and did all the protocols that Bill said, in front and calling and
Oh, he'd be so
clapping.
proud of you.
And I had to put my hand on her to shake them, and still nothing. And I started getting worried. I thought maybe they're dead, because they weren't moving at all. And then there was like this ever so less audible movement and sound.
Okay.
So then I knew I didn't have to do CPR because they were breathing. And,
Right.
right. And so then I'm thinking, well, what else to do? And then I remembered the card. So I pulled the card out, and Josh had his cell phone, so we phoned it. But I was quite miffed because we phoned the helpline,
Right.
and all it was an answering machine. So
Oh dear.
I left a message, there's an individual here that's not responding very well, but, barely responding, and left where we were and my name, but all that would do. But, and then I hung up, and then my mom, who's on oxygen and has dementia, is going down the ramp, and I think, oh, I gotta go.
Yeah, of course.
I knew she was breathing, and I said, well, can I pray for you? And of course, she's not really responding. I said, Josh, we're going to pray for her. So I put my hand on her, and I started praying, and I just asked the Lord Jesus to touch her, and she started crying. So, when a baby is first born, and you can hear them breathing and crying, and you're all happy they're alive, right? So it was that kind of a relief feeling, and I thought, okay, I can leave now, and we left. But yeah, I don't know, if I would have gone into that enclosure if I hadn't had this training, if I didn't know how to approach the person. I would have had that fear, what if they stab you, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I've got this training for a reason. I need to use
Well
it.
done. We're so proud of you.
Well, we've missed several because we were away. So if you don't mind, like those couple steps that you did when you first met her, and then the card.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about that during the class. But the card, I didn't bring. Oh yeah, actually I do have it with me. I always have it. Okay, so it's this card that we have that has the help. That was the one you're
That was
talking
the
about.
card,
Julie.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you that one because there should be some in the cathedral
Oh,
that I
okay,
can
well,
pick
or
up.
I can get one from there so that you keep this on.
That we'll just keep it here for
So
now.
is there nobody operating the
I
phones
thought it
on
was manned
Sunday?
24 hours because that's what I understood.
Okay.
But maybe just it wasn't. And but I would think that if you had left a message there, it would even perhaps been translated to the team that's on the C train
Okay.
that the peace officers could have even got
Okay.
there. So
Well, my son, as we were pulling away, my son saw someone else going into the enclosure
Okay,
with a cart or something, so they weren't left alone.
okay, that's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
awesome.
That was
Thank
really
you for
exciting.
sharing
Wow.
that. Thank you. Really good. And I think that that's what I found too, that the fear of the unknown is always the biggest thing. And
Yeah.
once you know some ideas and procedures, then it starts to reduce your fear. And I know that some homeless people have said that their biggest challenge is that they're invisible, that nobody wants to look at them, nobody wants to make eye contact, nobody wants to talk with them because of the fears or of being asked for money or whatever. And I have found that because of this journey that we've been on, that I'm much more, it's just like they're just my neighbors. And so I can talk and see them, and it's made me more comfortable. And I think partly because of what Bill has been teaching us about interactions and how to interact in a good way, a safe way, and that sort of thing. So that's good for me. Appreciate that. Any other thing people wanted to add?
Well, I just think, in the Q&A with Bill and what he shared with us last time, it just gave like, I feel as though I've got a mental picture more of what happens in a homeless shelter, what it's like. You know, I can kind of picture what's going on there.
Right.
Very helpful.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sad, but
yeah.
Yes. The first time that he shared that with us too, I found the same thing, that it demystified the idea and gave you some really practical insights of why people would be there and why they would choose not to be there. And that opened up a lot more understanding. Good. All right, that's excellent. We've talked in the past about resources for people who are homeless, that if somebody comes into the cathedral and wants to know about different things, and I have found that the best resource holistically is the Source right on the C train, on City Hall C train line. There is an organization called Source, SORCE, so spelled differently than the source about everything. But they're like a clearinghouse that has all the information about food and clothing and mental health services and health services and housing and everything. So people go in individually and talk with reception people, and then they can be directed to other folks that they're needing. I think there's usually counseling on site as well.
Sorry,
And-
where is this?
Just down the street, actually.
City Hall C train station,
Okay.
just right on the platform on the north side of the,
It's a nice day. If we have time, we can go for a walk, and I can show it to you.
yeah.
It's very
Yes,
close.
Yeah,
It's very
it's very close, and it has like a glass front, so you can, and signs on the
and
door,
it's
so.
open, it's daily?
It's daily, but not the weekends.
Oh.
I don't think it's open, I haven't
No.
seen it open on the weekend. But daily, and there's usually a lineup of people waiting to get in, and they just talk to them and individually for what's your needs, and then refer them to
Okay.
whatever is
Boy, that's
required.
really very practical.
Very practical. And there's also, in the same site, there is an Indigenous Friendship Center as well. So there's meeting places.
And an
Just
AHS
gathering.
clinic is there as well.
And what?
AHS clinic.
Yes, an Alberta Health Clinic.
But yeah, also if you want a tour, just email them and they'll give you a tour.
Yeah, I went in when we first started our downtown focus group, and they gave me all kinds of resources to have on hand that were really, really helpful.
But yeah, Zoe, if you ever want, like, yeah, anybody can just email them and say, I'd like a tour, and they can book you, it's like half an hour or whatever, to go through the site and everything that's in there for people.
That would be good. Okay. And then I just wanted to give a suggestion of a book that I just finished reading yesterday. It's called Rough Sleepers. And it's the story of a doctor who set up a clinic for homeless people who are sleeping rough, especially, rather than in shelters. And he just talks about his decades of working with people on the street and different stories about different people. And it gives you so many insights into the why and the what and the how of homelessness, and why it's a very complex, multifaceted situation. And that just saying, okay, this person is on the street, I'll just give them an apartment and then everything is solved. That is not usually the case. And why it's not usually the case. It was extremely insightful book for me. Not always easy to read because there are some stories of people's backgrounds and childhoods that were painful to read. But
That's like the tattoos on the heart.
yes, exactly. Yeah, tattoos on the heart is another one. But this book is very, very informative. When we're developing awareness, I would highly recommend that.
Would it be in the library
It
system?
is. I just pulled it up. They have some
Rough Sleepers?
ebooks and there's holds on the ebooks. Tracy Kidder, that name almost sounds familiar.
Is it? Okay, it didn't to me. But
So that's the author, Tracy
Tracy Kidder.
Kidder.
Yeah.
Is tattoos on the heart in there too?
Oh,
Yes.
they have it, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
They have all three of his
Yeah.
books.
And these two as well, that I'll talk about.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
Mate.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we were going to focus today too on mental health concerns, which is often an aspect of homelessness. And so I'll let Seema, you go ahead and share about that.
So I'm a social worker with RADICARE, and so a lot of what I do is helping make sure everybody stays healthy. And so that means making sure that they have a doctor that they can visit, or we go to CUPS, and then making sure they have a health plan. So something like if they're on AISH, then they'll have a health plan, or if they're on Alberta Works, they'll have a health plan. And if not those two, then there is like Alberta Health Benefit for those individuals as well. So that's part of my job, is to make sure that all of that, because healthy workers, happy workers, then we've seen, like, since I've been on there, it's been fantastic, right? You treat people like people and they respond, right? It's magic. But that's what makes Radicare different than, say, so Bill, I think he must have told you, he built this model on higher, what is it called? Higher work? No, higher.
Yeah.
Anyway, the one in Edmonton, they're not as awesome as us. And that's the difference, right? Is because, like, I have, not only me, the operations manager and I, we both have a lot of FaceTime with everyone, and we're looking all the time. Like, when I first got there, one woman had high blood pressure, and so my whole thing was, the medication's not working. Like, I could see it, right? Just because it's in my family and all of that. So then we took her to the doctor and got that sorted. And then, and then in the doctor's office, you see the anxiety rise because people aren't always treated well. And even for us, right? You go into the doctor's office, what are they going to say? And so that's a lot of my job, is to help people relax, right? To have a buddy there and to help with the doctors, right? Because they have a lot of judgments. And so when I go in, it's like, okay, this one was like, oh, well, she's on medication. I'm like, I don't think it's working. Can you please check, and to advocate for the patient, right? Well, she's already seen someone. And I'm like, for me, check, right? And then.
And do you have certain doctors that you go to?
Whatever.
Do you go to the clinic at 8?
Yeah, CUPS sometimes, but a lot of them do have their own doctors. So they are set up. It's just like when they come into work, I'm like the second screen, right? If something doesn't look right, then I'm like, okay, let's check. And for mental health resources for anybody, the library, Calgary Public Library, has a mental health desk on the third floor,
They do.
319. Yeah,
Yeah, that started after COVID.
yeah, during COVID. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's through Woods Homes, and then also the appointments are like an hour, and there wasn't a big lineup when I went on Friday, which is great. And then they can also refer you to their clinic in the Northeast as well, and that's also free counseling for an hour and a half appointment.
Okay.
So if anybody needs it, right? I mean, yeah, it's difficult, right? And like for anybody feeling anxiety, it's tough, right? Like what Gina went through, if she needed someone to debrief and talk to, I mean, we're great, but it's stressful, right?
It
You
is,
see that,
yeah.
you go through it, and so I always recommend if you go into those situations, make sure you're able to calm yourself down and relax. And so when you recount it, you're not stressed. And if you weren't stressed, so I wasn't worried. I'm not sending you there, but when you were counting it, when you were telling it to us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but some people, like when they recount what happened, they get stressed again, right? And for those people, that's what I'm looking for,
right.
right? And it's like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe like there's this free service. We can go to the library. If you don't want to, that's fine. We can just walk around or something like that, just to get the stress levels down. And so, like
This is
for
primarily those who are working with Radicare?
anybody,
Okay.
anybody.
And I think that's a really good reminder that we often talk about the issues and concerns and challenges of the vulnerable population that we're encountering, but then when you're working with them, there are also concerns that can come up that you need to debrief about. So, and it can sometimes trigger other things in your own past. So that's a really good reminder.
For sure. Like if someone comes into the cathedral and they're yelling and you're upset, and they leave and you're still upset, and the next day you're upset, then you really should like talk to someone, the pastor, whoever. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
Right.
Otherwise, you can't take care of any. Then the trauma builds, right? And you see that, so you don't want that, right? And that's why I always point out like there are services available in the medical clinics. They have the what are they called? Behavioral health consultants who are usually psychologists or social workers to talk to, and they're free. AHS has a lot of different resources as well, and the primary health too. So. Right. It's all about looking after our own mental health as well, right? So anybody, Wendy, if everybody could spread the word too, right? Like if anyone is in those stressful situations, there's help available. And that it's so hard because we always get there's not enough, and like, do I need it? Like, am I worth? Like they need it more than I do, right? And so we need to really break that thinking. Right? It's there for us too. Mm-hmm. And so I really think that we need to accept that, and for when I was seeing the behavioral health consultant, I was in a bad car accident. So I needed help managing chronic pain, and that was one of the ways to do that. And so when I was seeing him, I was like, well, how often can I see you? And he's like, as often as you need to. If I have availability, you have every right to come as much as anybody else, right? And so we really need to take that into account when we're helping people. So that can be one of your actions.
Yeah, exactly.
One of your actions.
That's a good point. It's a good other perspective.
Yeah, and
so let's talk about mental health issues with homelessness,
right.
Because often if it's both a cause and an effect at the same time, because if somebody has mental health concerns, they might not be able to, even if they were housed, they might not be able to hold on to their apartment. They might lose their job. They might not be able to manage finances. They might have episodes that cause them to be to lose their apartment building or their apartment space. So it can be a cause of homelessness in that way, and it can also be an effect of homelessness when we were talking last week about being in a shelter, if you're always worried about all of your stuff, then you're not going to sleep well. You're going to have stress and anxiety. You're going to not be settled to be able to focus on other things that maybe would improve your level of health. So it's both of these things working together that exacerbate the problem of homelessness. And when there are mental health issues too, especially anxiety and depression, then sometimes appointments that are set up, like you were saying, with counselors and things that could help the situation, then the person isn't able to follow through with those appointments and to kind of move forward with that. There was when we had a pop-up care village that Radicare had organized, there was a group that I was talking to, I think it's called Next Steps. Darn, I forgot the name of it. I think that's what it was called. Anyway, that they worked with people to just move them to the next level of whatever they were dealing with, not up here, just the next step of whatever situation they were dealing with. And what I really appreciated was that they would do it in whatever modality the person needed, whether that was by phone or by text or by email or by in person or any way that worked for that person, they were willing to go with. So I think it's that flexibility within the system that is very beneficial. Yeah. What have you encountered with within Radicare?
Not much, no, because I tend to take things right away.
Oh, yes.
Right, so I need to be ready. But where I was going with, looking after our own mental health, it's like we have those judgments that, we're not worthy of the care, right? And we have all the resources. So what happens to people, like we talked about in the beginning, when they don't feel worthy, and you can see that when they feel invisible, when they feel all of that. And so how does that impact them, right? And so to build on how we're feeling, and so if we don't feel well, we'll go to see our family, we'll go, for a walk and those types of things, but not everybody has that available to them. And so that's where a lot of the breakdowns happen, right? And so if you remember from last week, Bill mentioned shelter. Did you remember what else he mentioned in terms of housing? Do you remember permanent supportive housing? Yeah, so he talked about permanent supportive housing, and so that's where I'm from. And so there's one just down the street here, Langan Place. And so it is so scary, the cops don't like to come there. Like, we've had people where these, they're huge, they're 6 feet tall and broad shoulders, and they're like, I need to leave. And there was these two small women, we're social workers, we're like, well, we got to deal with the situation, right? And so in permanent supportive housing, this is what Wendy was talking about, when people aren't well enough to be on their own, and Bill talked about it last week, is they need 24-hour availability of care, right? So they're on their own, they have their own little apartment, they have a little stove and little locker space and whatever. And then we are in the office and it's staffed 24 hours a day. Right. And so morning is always the busiest. And so we were there for we'd help take them to appointments, make sure they saw the specialists. What else did we do in terms of outreach? Within the office, if there were any problems, but there were 54 men and in this building and all kinds of the spectrum. So we would have people who had untreated schizophrenia from methamphetamine use. We would have alcoholism. We'd have and the variety. Some people were working, some people were on AISH, some people were on Alberta Works, and so we had to make sure that everybody was getting their health care and doing the best they can. One of the really wonderful things about CUPS is they started sending workers to us. So we would have a nurse come in, and the nurse would do all the injections for people. And I don't know if you guys heard of the Mental Health Act. So what the Mental Health Act is that, I don't like to say it, it's not, but it's it's not forced treatment, but it's treatment that, if a psychiatrist thinks you need it, or a doctor thinks you need it, then that's what happens,
Oh,
right? And so for our facility, what would happen is if we had a violent situation, when we had a violent situation, if there was a weapon involved, or if something like that the cops could come in to help us with, then they would come in, and then they would fill in a mental health form. I think it was 8, and then but you need the 1, right? So an 8 would say like, okay, well you have to come with us to the clinic. And then after at the clinic, then they would see someone, and then they would say, well, now you have to take these injections. And it's tough, right? In terms of well, what about personal choice and all of this? But the difference, right? Like when they were taking their medication and not, night and day, right?
Then they have the capacity to make those choices once they have the help they need medically.
Exactly. And when it was voluntary, they wouldn't, they'd miss the appointments, they wouldn't do it. But when it's mandatory, the nurse is coming to them, completely different situation, right? Altogether. And so it was just a lot easier to manage. And then the thing is that it's not one person, right? It's 54. So if one person is just like, what was he all night, like screaming and yelling, banging on the walls, and these walls are like the old schools, like they had like the brick, like the solid brick. Yeah, it was pretty intense a lot of the time.
Which you can understand would affect somebody's ability to be housed in a community house.
Oh yeah, no, for sure,
So how do they end up in that?
So with Calgary Housing, so what happens is they'll go to the source, and then they'll fill out, or any facility with Housing Management Information System. So they could go to drop-in center, a source, I can't remember, maybe Alpha House. And so they'll fill out something called an NSQ. At Langan Place, you could also do, it's called Needs and Services Questionnaire. And so everybody fills out this questionnaire, and then it gets put into a pool, right? And so then all the housing managers come together. So like for permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, community housing, and they all will sit around and discuss. This person, I think they're good for your facility, or this person, I think they're good for your facility.
So they're not putting somebody who is working and functional in there, you know what I mean?
It depends, right, on the level of care that they need. Because we had a lot of people who were working and functioning, but they needed the extra support. And we were a harm reduction facility, so that's the other problem too, right? So if they're still actively using, then they have to be in permanent supportive. I mean, they might be in transitional, but almost always they come into permanent. So harm reduction.
That's good to know, just those different levels of housing, that you don't go from being on the street to an apartment in a building, that there are different levels that can give support for a person.
It depends on the city. Calgary is very much like everybody gets together and they talk about it.
When they get into the facility, if they want to upgrade, is there room for that?
Yes, if they'd like to, then we would work with them. We would try to get them into transitional housing, and then try to get them in community housing.
So those are kind of the steps: supportive housing, transitional housing, community, the steps.
It's very rare though. Once they're with us, like it's almost like a hospital. Like it's pretty tough.
Well, there's the community that they don't want to leave, maybe too.
It is, but a lot of it's the level of care. There's, like I said, there's always someone in the office. There's always someone available, right? And in transitional, it's not always the case, and in community, definitely not.
One of the stories in this book about rough sleepers was about a lady who had been on the street and really worked hard to get her sobriety. And she was in a community apartment, just a normal apartment downtown, and had been clean and sober for 2.5 years. And then the building she was in was being sold and converted to hire fancy condos. And so she was being evicted, like they all had, just, 60 days or whatever to be evicted. And what she was saying in this story was that she knew if she had to go back on the street, that she would start drinking and using again, because that would be the only way she could cope.
Mhm.
And with mental health issues, you realize that again, it's this cycle, but if you are drinking and if you are using drugs, that isn't good for your brain health. So then your brain health starts to deteriorate, and then then you it isn't just a case of getting clean and sober. It's the effects of what the damage that has been done to your system from these years, sometimes decades and decades of being on the street and having these substances in your body and in your brain. So that's what makes it more complex. And in some of the situations, they were saying in the book, it's not just rehab, it's more like respite, because the person has become so damaged in their health that it isn't just Band-Aid fixes, it's long-term fixes that are needed, long-term health care that is needed. Yeah.
So what happened to the woman?
She
Read the book, read the book.
Actually, in this case, they were looking for transitional housing for her, and she passed away before
Mhm.
the end of her
Happens.
eviction notice. She passed away before that.
Yeah, it's actually
Yeah.
pretty common,
Yeah.
and so what I'll do at the end of the month, it's called No One Dies Alone training with AHS. So I did the tri-agency. It's for like end of life care, and so this is just one other thing. But the reason I got pushed to the No One Dies Alone level is because we had so many deaths, and then in April, I don't know if you follow the news, there was a huge spike in deaths. And I was at another good resource. It's Coffee with Cops?
Yes.
Cookies with Cops?
Oh.
Conversations. Maybe it's conversations. They serve cookies and coffee too.
Yeah.
But it's just at the
Oh, wow.
what do you call it? The superstore here downtown. And so it's like in the foyer they'll have Alpha House, they'll have cops, they'll have the peace officers, and one of the police officers. And so because I was in the housing complex very close by, I went. And I chatted with one of the cops, and he's like, be very careful and be on the lookout. There's a new drug in the supply,
Yes.
and it's called xylazine.
Yes.
Yeah, and yeah, and so this was in April, right when it started, and so we're all bracing ourselves, and so where we never saw overdoses and deaths, we were seeing them, and
From this new.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
a tranquilizer. So what was happening is, so I don't know if Bill went through this, but
He did a little bit at one.
yeah, so methadone and like methamphetamines and cocaine, like those are uppers, right? And
Yeah.
like opioids
a course on this.
are downers. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's so much information. If I'm going too fast, please let me know.
Okay.
But what was happening was the people who were taking uppers, they were tranquilized, right? And so the street name for xylazine is Trankdope. And so that's what was happening, is that you'd get these people who you knew were on certain things, and then they were just zombies. And then if they were on opioids and got this, it made it very hard, right? Because I'm sure Bill talked about this. The reason why opiates cause death is because you stop breathing.
Yes, it suppresses your.
Yeah, it suppresses your.
I have a question.
Of course, please.
Why would the whoever is producing this stuff, want to kill off all their customers?
They might not know.
Right? I just
Like-
don't get it.
I think it's not an exact science.
Yeah, that's the
sometimes,
problem.
And they're cutting it
Money.
with things to make it extend farther.
Yeah.
Like you might add something to, like breadcrumbs to a meatloaf to make it extend farther, but so they add things, but Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it, if you're killing off your customers with a potent thing that is harmful, toxic.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
xylazine is actually used in like animal pharmaceuticals. So it's a tranquilizer for animals, for horses.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, even for elephants.
Yeah.
So
For big
we're
animals.
smaller than elephants.
Yeah, for big animals.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing.
I just wanted to mention more about the effects of homelessness affecting your mental health. And I've worked overseas in countries that have a lot of violence and crime. And because of the constant violence and crime, we were always attentive to our surroundings and to what was going on around us. And what we found was that the need to be hyper vigilant, of always being aware of what was going on around you, that heightens your adrenaline level. And adrenaline is meant for instant action, fight or flight. But when it's always in your system, it creates health problems with increased respiration, increased heart rate, and so on. And that is not good for you, to always be at this hyper level of arousal and action. And so we found, for my team that was working in that situation, that we had to take time away every 6 weeks to 2 months just to lower those levels. And it took like 2 or 3 days before you were breathing normally and feeling normal again. Just like we went around the first day going, just releasing this stress.
Yeah.
But for people on the street that are in shelters and can never really relax because they don't know when somebody will ask them to move on, or if somebody's going to try and take their stuff, or somebody's going to harass them, that level of arousal, of alertness is always there. And so I think sometimes when we see people, part of it is part of what we're doing is developing empathy for the situation that they're in and the effects of the situation they're in on their own body. So when we see people sleeping in doorways and sleeping on the sidewalk and so on, it's physical rest that they need. But I think sometimes they're out in the open under lights as a protective device in one way, and that sometimes those sedatives and drugs that they're taking are just a way to go unconscious and rest from all of this hypervigilance that they are often on during the day. So we're often, I know in living downtown and encountering people all week long, that question, Gina, you had of the lady, is she alive or is she not alive? Is she in need of help or not in need of help? Is why we started the block walks and the wellness checks that Bill has been walking us through. So Gina, do you want to just, I'll let you be the teacher for a minute and just remind us of what you remembered. That was a bad sentence, but what was it that Bill had talked to you about that you remembered when you were in that situation?
Okay, well, when you approach the person, don't approach them from the back or anything, which was obvious. Her back was against the wall, but get in front and call out to them, and then clap your hands, and then get down, in front of them. And yeah, she was hunched over so bad, I could not see her at all. So I put my hand on her shoulder eventually and just gave it a shake, and there was very minimal sort of movement in response. I was still concerned. They were probably breathing. They weren't dead. I was kind of eliminating all those things as.
That's very good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No,
And then,
that's what we're supposed to do.
then there was a very low sound. So yeah, I knew they were still breathing. And then that was like, what to do, right? And I thought, oh, the guards. It was like my lifeline. I pulled this card out, and then I'm phoning. So yeah, you're feeling anxious and for this person and not knowing what to do for them. You want to do so much. It gave me something to do. It gave me something to do to get the phone and phone the person. And I said to my son, well, my naloxone kit's in the car, but we'll just see if we need it, but we didn't. But now I've got it in my bag, so
There you go.
I'm not going to go anywhere without it now. At least not on
Yeah,
these
'cause
trips.
you just don't know, do you?
No, so I'm getting this heightened awareness of what I need to do because you know what, this training is needed. It's out there.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. And you know, if you had done nothing else, Gina, than to call the number, even though it was an answering machine you got, but that's enough. It means that you have let somebody know that there's a problem
I've
and to
used the
get
system.
help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We need to iron out a bug here.
Yeah, but what you did was awesome. That's
Yeah.
good. So just going over the steps that we've been learning. When you encounter somebody that you're concerned about, your first ability is just the ability of observation. If they are moving, if they're making a noise, then like Gina says, you don't have to start CPR because
That's right, and it was really good.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that he showed me to evaluate and
Yes.
eliminate all those
Yes,
things.
you know that they're breathing. You know that they have got life in them if they are moving and making a sound. But then to approach from the feet rather than the head is a courteous thing because if you were asleep and somebody suddenly towering over you and you wake up to this face in your face, that is frightening.
Yeah.
And what I appreciated about when Bill would be showing us was that he talked loudly and he told people what he was doing the whole time, and which is also good because you're also informing if there's any bystanders around you that you're not coming to rob the person or something like that, that you're concerned about their well-being. So he would approach from the feet and say, as he walked towards them, say, hey, how are you doing? Good morning. How are you? And just checking to see if you're okay. And then if there's no responses, Gina was saying, you know, clapping your hands just to increase the volume of what you are doing. And then approaching from the feet and observing if the person is looking like they're okay. You can tap the bottom of the feet with your foot, the bottom of the foot or shoe, just to, because that moves the muscle and moves their nerves so that maybe they're going to respond and make a sound or something like that and say, you know, I'm just checking if you're okay. And then as Gina said, you know, maybe touching the shoulder and shaking it. There's a nerve there or a muscle there that you can pinch. If you do it to yourself and you pinch, you can feel it. Like you can, that's a pain point. And so if somebody is alert or okay, breathing and alive, then that will arouse them, just pinching there. And then assessing breathing. And if they're not breathing and not moving, then we go into the naloxone response that we talked about before. If they're not, if there's no response, if they're unresponsive and they're not breathing.
But from a social work standpoint, I really do appreciate that, you know, you approach them and you ask them if you could pray for them.
Yeah.
And then you just touched them too, right?
Yeah.
Because like as Wendy opened up, the biggest thing with homelessness is people feel invisible. But when you touched her, she wasn't invisible anymore. So even that, if that's all you did, that also would have been enough.
Right.
Right? And so like there's times when we're not okay, right? And so if we can just, hi, I see you, right? Or hello, that's enough on its own as well. Right? So that's something we can remember too, right? Just to one of the guys at work, like he's homeless, but we sat together, we went to the library on the train. right? We were chatting and whatever, and so they feel seen, right? Like we were having problems, like people weren't coming to work on time and all of this, but then, just a quick, hey, how's it going? Like, is there something I can help you with? I talked to this person, like they can help you with housing, or they can. So the minute people feel like someone else cares, it's enough, right? And
Wow.
so, yeah.
I was kind of kicking myself leaving, thinking, there's something more I can do.
No.
But I knew they were alive.
Yeah.
And
we
just continued to pray for them.
100%. Yeah.
Like I said, somebody go in.
Yeah.
And you don't know what he's gonna do after you're gone.
Yeah.
But you did what you needed to do in the moment that you were there.
100%.
And sometimes you can't be there for even the time it takes for the help team to respond. That may be quite a while. And if you can't, you do what you're able to do and then hand the baton to somebody else.
Yeah.
So you did that. That was good. Yeah. And we'll be talking more at the naloxone training on December the 3rd about responsiveness and unresponsiveness and how to react. We had that class a month ago, and that was really helpful to me. Yeah, it was good.
But like I said, like something you can do that's very easy is just say hello.
Yes.
How are you?
Yes.
On the train, on the platforms,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, because sometimes that breaks their cycle, right? Like for me, I was very sick, and I had one car accident, then I got to a second one, and so I was like, I'm not going to be okay, and like everything's horrible.
Yeah.
And then somebody else was like, well, what if you're okay? And I was like, what? That never dawned upon me, right? What if I was? I wasn't, but okay. Like, and so that's what you're doing, right? Like people have all of these, like this stream of negative consciousness. And the minute somebody, doesn't fulfill that expectation, no one's going to see me, no one loves me, no one this. Oh, hey, how's it going? What?
I actually had one of the homeless guys that we visited a few weeks ago. He made me feel better because here I was, it was my first time going out and just feeling sort of invisible in my own world. And one of the homeless guys called me auntie. You don't know how touched I was.
100%.
Oh my
It's human to human.
Like when we were saying goodbye, I was walking away, wow. I
100%.
That's good.
I'm somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. That's awesome.
Really lifted my day.
Yeah.
I think too, when we're walking and when we encounter a situation, this is a good time just to be praying for discernment, because some situations may be a little bit more than we are able to manage, and some may be completely within our means. And one of the things that Bill often stresses is just be aware of your own boundaries, of your own comfort zone, and don't put yourself into a situation that you don't feel safe or you don't feel able to manage. So, pray for discernment about that as we go along. And I think that if somebody is sleeping and doesn't want to be disturbed, then sometimes they don't always respond with happiness.
I wouldn't either.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And like we said, if you're under this stress all day and just need to a downtime, then sometimes people just want that and not to be disturbed. So having that discernment to know when you're really concerned about that person and when they just need to be left alone. But sometimes, even when we were talking about the naloxone training, that sometimes when people are brought back from not breathing to being able to breathe and be fully alive again, that they're not happy. They're not happy with you interrupting that situation that they were in. So
Finally had some release.
Yeah, exactly. So
that also
let
helps.
let the situation evolve as it is without expectations.
if you tell someone, you don't even have to use it. You just tell someone, I have naloxone, you'll be surprised at how well they jump up. Like, they do. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We had those problems a couple of times, and it's like, I've got the naloxone. Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm glad you're fine. I'm glad you're fine.
Yeah.
So, as long as they're
Yeah,
breathing, then
yeah.
that's good. But yeah, like I said, it's just little things,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to save someone's life, right? It's just to be seen, right? And and reflect on how do we feel? Like you were saying, like you were reflecting on your life and how you didn't feel seen, right? And then and then, you got that validation, you got that care from someone else, right? And so it comes from all places. And so just to quickly, it's 10, so I don't want you guys to be late.
Okay.
I just want to quickly talk about these books. So this one is From the Ashes by Jessie Thistle, and it's an amazing book because, like, when we talk about addiction, and I didn't get to this unfortunately, but there was a big study called the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences.
We've talked about that. Yeah.
And so what they found is that people with these experiences, they have chronic illnesses, right? And so when you read this book, you'll find he had a lot of ACEs. But what they don't talk about a lot, even in social work, is that there's also positive childhood experiences. And so in the beginning of the book, he talks about his grandmother and the love that his grandmother had. And if you guys watch The Dragon's Den, there's Wes Hall. He's one of the new dragons in the new season. And if you read his story, it's the same thing. He had that love from his grandmother in the beginning. And so it formed a protective factor. And so now he's like on the Dragon's Den. He's a wealthy guy. And this guy, he won the Vanier, I was telling Zoe, he won the Vanier Scholarship, which is a huge scholarship in university. And he's a PhD, now, best-selling book. But he was in jail, and he was a crack addict, and all of these things, right? So then how did he evolve? And it's that care that someone took in the beginning, and it's care that we can administer by just waving, right? And so I feel that that's really important for us to remember. We don't have to, like I said, go out and save people, but we do have to be human to human, and remember that they're just people too. We're people too. And what do we need, right? And for us, it's easy to get, but it's not so easy for them to get. And I think, like, next book, before Mate speaks, what he's talking about, he doesn't say, oh, I'm sorry, here you go, Gina. He doesn't say, why the
screen.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Why the addiction? He always asks, why the pain, right? And how are we coping? And the thing that he talks about with addiction is that it's almost enough, right? Like, we feel so terrible, like heroin, it like feels like a hug, like morphine, it's calming, it's soothing. So what would we do? We'd go, I'd hug my nephew or something like that to get that same feeling, right? I wouldn't go for that. And so it's that breakage in community. It's those different experiences that Wendy was talking about. They have shaped the brain a little differently, but it's not that hopeless, right? People can come back and do amazing things that we could never dream of, right? Like Zoe and I was like, that's PhD, what? Like
Wagamese.
Yes.
Yes,
Even after
exactly.
winning awards, he ended up back in jail,
Yeah, he
just
was
that-
quite ill, yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
what's possible still.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, he
Thank you for those books. Those are really good. I love new resources.
Mhm.
And this is one more resource I'm just going to pass around as we end. This is from the Calgary Police Service. And today our focus was on mental health issues. And there has been a movement over the last number of years to move from like criminalizing and arrests of people that are perhaps causing a disturbance because of a mental health issue, and having that dealt with in a less confrontational manner, de-escalating with social workers and the help team and others. So this tells you about how the Calgary Police Service is responding to vulnerable people in our community and the different teams that they have that are involved in that response.
So one of them is the PAC team, and
Yeah.
so they would have a police officer and a nurse with them.
Wow.
And so we saw that a lot in our facility. They would both come, and yeah, the police were really great when they were with the nurses. And so they would talk about the individual, and sometimes we'd connect with the families, and so we'd all have it'd be like a regular care conference kind of thing that we would have with everyone.
And the
Yes.
acronym PAC, P-A-C, how,
Police and crisis team.
Now, I think one of the blessings in Calgary right now is just this increased awareness of mental health issues, especially after the pandemic, and more resources been put into that area of care.
And the nurses were wonderful because they would come in and they would check and they would be like, do you guys need any help with this particular individual and that kind of thing. Because Langan Place was the last stop. You were back on the street if you couldn't make it in our facility. So they worked very
basically,
hard.
It sounds like they're putting some more touchy-feely back into what
They need
never
to.
had.
Yeah,
The courts had sort of just made some strange
100%.
decisions and left people victims.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah, they're definitely.
I have been a part of that.
Oh.
And of course, what it does is it makes the general public not look at the police the way they used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Next week, we'll be talking about healthcare as a whole and the court system, because that figures into homelessness as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for those viewing online, and have a good week.